Previously.
Out of RCS. So now we're going to just main engine on. Take it down. Let's take it a bit quicker than that, I think. And uh-oh. That's not good. Well. Oh dear. Nakot. I got some bad news. I think you're going to be in space for a while. Welcome back to Basics on Kerbal Space Program 1.10. We are doing it today. We're going to do the mission that's been waiting for a while to happen. We're going to go and get Nakot Kerbin. Right now you can see that before we go and do it, I wanted to get some of our new pilots some experience, primarily because I want them to be able to do prograde and retrograde burns. It just makes it a little easy for me. Also, I think, I like to be, I'm going to say realistic, it's not realistic, but I just feel as though they should have actually been to space before they try and do some docking and things like that. So as you can see, we sent them up, we put them into orbit, we bring them back down. This is a Jeb 1 that's basically been stripped of its side boosters, and it comes down, it lands, and we're ready. So this is the craft we're using, the Gene 2. We've actually used it for parts of other missions and things like that, but never in this form. So it's basically Onion Stage, 2 side boosters. It's an evolution of the Gene 1B that Nakot is actually in. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. We're going to send, I think it's Sigsy Kerbin up there, and I basically seem to get quite lucky at the start here. I'm looking to try and launch near the orbit of Nakot, and I don't do too bad. This is the first flight of this craft in this form. It flies really nicely, actually. Some of the modifications for other flights that I've used it in have sort of dampened it down, but it's perfectly designed for this. It gets into a nice arcing orbit. You get a decent sort of second burn requirement, so it's easy to do. And here you can see I'm just playing around with my circularization burns, so that instead of going into a nice circular orbit, I'm going to try and intersect the orbit with Nakot. And on the far side of the planet there, you can actually see I've got a little bit of an intersection, but my orbit is very different. It's actually sort of skew. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to basically move up around there and get sort of close to her craft, and then I'm going to try and sort of circularize my orbit. Now, this isn't the way that you would normally do it. What you'd normally do is you would normally pull into a higher or a lower orbit, and you'd orbit around until you caught up with or fell back to the target vessel. But because we tried to actually bring Nakot back, her orbit is not really circular. It's not bad, but it isn't really circular. So I thought, while we have an opportunity to do this, let's just do it as quickly and as tightly as we can. So this isn't the most efficient way of doing this. I've overburned here and I've underburned there, but you can see I've got an intersect there, and it's not too bad. It's it's a few K. It's not brilliant. I'm not going to be docking straight away, but it does put me in a situation where I can play around a little bit in a moment with the maneuver nodes to try and get closer in. And now you can see I'm looking at the interactions, the closest approach on the other side of the actual planet, on the other side of Kerbin now. And so now I start to burn. I try to sort of point myself in that retrograde for target vessel. So this isn't retrograde from my orbit, this is retrograde to the target, where I'm going faster than it, so the opposite direction. So I'm going to slow down. I'm going to slow down to match speed, and you can actually see my speed and the target speed start to become very similar. And what actually happens is that closest approach starts to move, and it moves away from me because I'm slowing down. I can look at either of those. I'm actually looking at the far one now, and I'm looking at and jumping back between the two of them, just trying to see which one's going to be the one I want to go for, which one's going to take me the closest. And it's basically like 2 shots now. I just want to spin round until I get a nice close approach. When I get nearer to these close approaches, I can then fine tune it. Now, remember, I am pretty much in plane with NACOT right now. I haven't done an inclination change, so this is a lot easier sort of rendezvous procedure than normal. If I was flying to the Mun, which I will have to do at some point to rescue some of the boys, it would be a bit more, there'd be another stage at the start of this where I'm looking at sorting out my inclination and things like that. But we've launched straight into orbit and gone straight for this rendezvous. It's a very, very quick. So we've actually got to a rendezvous point within half an orbit, which means we've now got the sun, instead of being on one side of us, it's on the other side of us. This does, however, mean that potentially at this point, my docking could be in the dark. You just see there I get rid of the parachute that I put on the top. I must change. When I built this rocket, I didn't have little small nose cones. I don't know if I don't or not. I've got some other tech unlocked. But I'm using a parachute as a nose cone because I don't have anything else. I could put a big fairing around the craft, but that weighs a lot, and it seems a bit excessive. So I've now switched to a little bit of RCS, and I'm basically playing around. I'm playing around trying to even out my speed to the target vessel, and I'm looking now. I've set the target vessel, and I can see in the background there how close I am. I can see it getting closer and further away. And so what I start to do is go, right, okay, I'm going to go towards it, directly towards it. This is not what would happen in the real world. In the real world, I would go prograde, retrograde, and I'd change my orbital height until I came in behind or just in front of the target. I'm doing this in Kerbal, which means I've got a little bit of extra delta V to play with, but also I've got a lot more curvature of the planet, so it's a little more tricky because of that. I'm going to just keep moving in and in slowly. I'll boost towards. I'll move towards it. The distance will go down. Just as the distance starts to go up again, I then zero out my velocity. You can see at the bottom there, I'm keeping an eye on the velocity, looking at my target velocity. This is the difference between the two craft. We're both spinning around a planet, but I'm keeping an eye on that target velocity because I know if I can get closer and then zero that velocity out, we're on the same track. We're on the same basically orbital path, and I should stay roughly the same distance away from the craft. What will actually happen is I sort of librate almost. I don't know if that's the correct term, but I will go in and out. But at this point on the next orbit, the distance between us should be the same if our difference in speed is zero. So I just keep working backwards and forwards now. We're just working backwards and forwards, moving in towards the craft. I give it a burst of engine here or a little bit of RCS there. I am not prepared to dock yet. I haven't checked the other craft. I don't actually remember which way around it is at this point. You'll see in a minute where I actually have to check so that I know which end I'm going to go for. And I move closer and closer and closer. This didn't actually take as many steps as probably I normally would. I think it took 3 sort of steps in. Here you can see I'm actually just preparing myself to zero out that velocity difference again, because I can see myself getting closer and closer. And now we've got the sun, which is perfect. So we've now done another half. So we've done one full orbit now. Only one orbit. Within one orbit, we are in basically sight. And now I've switched over to NACOT. We can actually see NACOT there. And it's in this anti-normal position that I placed her in at the end of that thing. And I can actually see she's been in orbit over 60 days. So the snacks are running low. We need to get her down. A bit like the boys around the Mun, which we need to sort out, but again, we will get to that. So we move in, we continue doing this, we continue moving out of the push, and now our speed is very similar. So now I'm playing around going, oh, what's going on? Now, I made a mistake here. What I should have done was actually orientate the craft I'm flying in the way that I normally launch, because that's how I'm used to flying. But I've actually got it backwards. I've actually got our crew facing NACOT, which is probably how you would do it in reality. You'd actually look at where you're going. You'd also have cameras doing it. I've also changed the camera view into chase mode so I can position it and see it more easily. And you can see here it looks really good. I'm sort of moving in. I'm lined up nicely. I'm just tapping it. I've got used to flying it backwards. I should have just turned it around. But the problem with this is the camera, whenever I get very close to zero target speed, starts to spin off, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's changing automatically. I don't know if our orbit's a little high or a little low, or it's something to do with periaps change. I don't know. You may notice this sometimes, and it's not me panning. The camera just spins. There we go. Perfect example. and that throws me off. So I continue to fiddle out, and then I notice I'm coming in at a skew, at an angle. I'm not facing normal, which is a problem. Now this is partly down to craft design. You will see I have some RCS on the bottom and some on the top. The craft, however, is not balanced. I've burned some fuel. We've got a lot still on board. I thought I was going to burn more. So what's actually happening is when I'm actually trying to translate side to side and keep my nose pointing upwards, it's actually bringing a bit of twist and torque into the craft a little bit. Not much, but just enough to start shifting the position of my craft. So it looks perfectly lined up here. It looks as though I'm perfectly on the normal, but from the side, I'm a bit wonky. Not brilliant. Not a brilliant start. At this point, I should have probably, and there we go, the camera has spun again. So at this point, I should have probably held position and not gone for it. Or I should have knocked or got nearby and knocked off my SAS and just hoped. But I didn't. I basically started overreacting. Again, the craft is now facing in a random direction. I'm stood behind where the pilot is, looking out as if I'm the pilot. And I keep hitting the wrong keys. This is really easy to do. This is my second docking in 7 years, 5 to 7 years. So I'm really confident after the first one, where NACOT was involved, and I'm starting to think, yeah, I can do this dead easy. And then I start to get stressed. One of the worst things you can do when docking in KSP is either rush or get stressed and overact, right? I could have just equalized out my speed there and just left it, but I didn't. Okay, I'm now looking at, I think on the chart, orbital speed. Why am I looking at orbital speed? It doesn't help me at all. If I'd have changed that to target speed, it would be much more useful. And here we go. I think at this point I want to dock, and I've missed. I could just pull it back and try again. I'm a little slow reacting, and I start to pull back, and this is the situation where I've got to be very careful, because you know what? Here it's very easy to just try and jab it. Now, I don't think you can get much closer without docking. I'm wondering right now what's going on. NACOT's craft, oh, and we've got some magnetism going on. NACOT's craft is moving towards me, and now in real life that wouldn't happen. In real life they would not move so close so easily. That's the magnetism of the docking ports in Kerbal. They're there to help you. You noticed I knocked off SAS just before that happened. What I could have done is actually go to NACOT's craft, and I may have actually done that, I can't remember, and knocked off her SAS. And then the two of them would have actually moved towards each other. There you saw me transfer some fuel, and I moved a little bit of fuel from one tank, thinking that'll be enough. And then I looked on the left-hand side and realised, hold on, I've moved half the fuel from one of my tanks. Why is that one so low? NACOT's craft has got a low amount of fuel. Then I realised these craft are built with two tanks. They were built, or the first one, the Gene 1, was built before I had longer tanks. I'm still using shorter tanks for it. I should really change them out. But that means that I've actually emptied half of one tank. Now, I'm pretty sure that will get NACOT home. However, I'm also aware that, you know what, we've had to do this a few times. So I'm now thinking to myself, should I do something about it? Anyway, we do a little bit of EVA because particularly the new crew will get some experience for that, I think. So a little EVA out in orbit after docking. It's wonderful. Both of them there. It's a lovely shot, actually. I really like the two of them in orbit there. I wish that the text wasn't there. I'm sure I could hit the screenshot button or something like that to get rid of it. But I actually love that shot. So we now start putting them back in. And this is where I come back to looking at the fuel level and think, yeah, that should be enough. But in reality, I decide, you know what, we need to play it safe. So I'm going to probably in the next second start transferring some fuel around. Am I? No, I'm thinking of undocking. And that's when I start to think about it. And I start to look and go, oh, that tank's empty. And it's this point that I go, right, okay, we'll move some fuel around. So, nice and easy because we've got the tech, because obviously earlier on I couldn't have done this. In fact, when we had Jeb and NACOT up in orbit doing this process, I don't think I had the tech to allow me to do fuel transfer. I'd have to go back and check. But if you're starting out, please remember, if you're on career mode and it's all of the sort of rules enforced, you will have to make sure that you have the tech to do fuel transfer. Otherwise, this sort of procedure is not going to work. What I had actually planned, and we're just going to return Sidzi now. Sidzi's going to fly through the atmosphere. What I'd actually planned was, if I'd have done this earlier and I didn't have fuel transfer, oh, that's a horrible engine noise, isn't it? If I didn't have fuel transfer, what I would have actually done is probably kept the two craft attached. Sidzi would have put Nakot into a suborbital trajectory and then undocked, turned around and put herself back into an orbital trajectory, so that Nakot could then be landed and then we'd come back to Sidzi. But I didn't have to do that because I could actually transfer that fuel over. So what are we doing now? Well, we're changing back to Nakot because we have to bring her back down. So we switch over to Nakot. Oh, black screen. There we go. Right. And this is it. This is the step we've been waiting for. Nakot is finally going to come home. Now, I could have sent a craft up with a two-seater pod and put her in the other seat and brought her down in one. To me, you know, that would have been the cool way of doing it, but it just felt sort of poetic that she was going to bring herself back down after all that time up there. She's been up there for over 2 months in Kerbal time, okay? Kerbal days are 6 hours long, so you're looking at, in reality, half an Earth day. Half an Earth month. But even so, it's a long time. She's very lonely. She doesn't have a transmitter on the craft. She can't get television. She can't get anything. The internet is terrible there. In fact, given the fact there is no cities on Kerbin, there's probably no internet. So here we are coming back down. Now normally I'd speed this up a lot, but I've actually gone quite slow on it because I think it's quite nice to watch. It's a nice re-entry. We're coming over land. It's lovely and bright. None of these dark night ones, which is, for some reason Kerbal seems to generate vast numbers of night landings. I should really look at the maths as to why I always seem to land in the dark. We hear the remnants of her sort of pod crashing down, and so the capsule comes down nice and easy. Could probably speed this up a little bit. See some trees there. Nakot looks very happy at this point. In fact, she's looked very happy for most of the time, even when she was still in orbit. So what's the next step? Well, as soon as she gets down, we're going to have to start thinking about her next mission. And that's going to be an interesting one because we've spent a bit of time getting her back. This was quite a quick docking and a rendezvous and docking, but even so, it took some time. So she's down, she's safe, and she's going to do some science because she can, because we don't have science from, I think that was Grasslands or whatever it was. Gets back in the pod, and there we go. So she's back, she's raring to go, she's got some science, she's still on the first level, which is, I think, a bit rude. And that's it. So we've got some science to look around at. I'm probably going to hire some extra scientists for our next mission, but until then, have a great one.